We can talk about the best ways to practice, but if you have not identified that, okay, Tuesday afternoons from 4 to 5:30 or whatever it is, then it's going to be hard to make any progress at all. So I think that as you're entering the week, looking ahead and thinking about, where do the lessons fit in, where do the practice sessions fit in, and making sure everybody's on board, with the plan, and maybe even talking about, okay, if you don't feel like it on a certain time, do we have a backup? Things like that. And I could have benefited from this practice in my life growing up, especially because, I wasn't just, I did other things. I did cheerleading, I was busy. And I do feel like with a little bit more forward planning, I might have been less stressed at like, oh my gosh, I don't know this music in our, dress rehearsals tomorrow and, whatever it was. So takes some of the reactivity out of it and probably makes things a lot more fun.
Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast. This is a space where we talk about music practice, the ups and downs that young musicians go through related to practice and learning music, and how we as parents, caregivers, and music educators can support the young musicians in our lives, support ourselves, and support each other. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. I'm glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by my recent session about supporting students with developing attention and focus in the practice room and in music lessons. We covered frequently reported pain points by teachers, parents, and students, helpful information to know about attention and focus, some additional information about ADHD that's helpful for parents and teachers to know, and specific strategies that can help in music practice and music lessons. If you'd like access to the recorded video and the audio-only file, along with some resources that I sent out after the talk, you can find a link to purchase those on my website or in the show notes. I hope this resource supports you, and I appreciate you supporting the work of this podcast anytime you purchase one of my resources. Let's jump into our conversation with today's guest. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited today to have a guest here whose work I really benefit from and learn from every week, Sarah Hart-Unger. Sarah is a practicing pediatric endocrinologist. She also has two podcasts, one that I start off my week with every Monday morning called Best Laid Plans, all about planning and I think really just breaking down systems that help us stay organized and on top of life. And then also Best of Both Worlds with Laura Vanderkam, which is another great podcast about sort of busy moms balancing work and parenting or life outside of work. So those are two resources after we talk today you might want to check her out on. And also she has a great book that came out this past December called Best Laid Plans that I really enjoyed kicking off my year reading. And we're going to talk about planning today for sure. But what I love is that also Sarah grew up playing music and studying music. And I understand at least one of her children practices at home and studies music. So I think we'll get to weave in so many topics that listeners will, all of you will benefit from hearing today. So thank you for being here, Sarah, and welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to talk about music stuff because I feel like this is something most people don't know anything about my background. And I'm super excited. It's like a new, fresh perspective and way that we can apply planning. Although I don't know that I did it as much growing up. So maybe we'll talk about how I could have used some of the lessons that I know today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of listeners to the podcast are parents who might be supporting their kids at home in practice. And when I think about it, I just think about the role that like a parent is often helping us with the planning portion of practice. Like, when will you do this? How will we fit it in before they hand it off to their kids and they do it themselves? So that makes total sense.
Totally, totally.
Maybe you could share, since we like to talk about music on the podcast a lot, just about what instrument or instruments you learned growing up and, what you remember about your experience.
Sure. Yeah. So I started playing piano at age 5 and I played all through, I don't know, the beginning of high school. And I never loved practicing, but I did do it. I had a sort of a love-hate thing. I knew I was decent at it and I could see myself getting better and I enjoyed kind of achieving in that way. And I did like the music. And so that would propel me. My parents would be like, well, why don't you stop if you don't like it? We'll cancel it. And then it's like, no, I still want to do it. So I kept it up for a long time. And then in elementary school, I started playing violin. And actually, I liked that a lot more, not because the instrument itself was more fun, but because there was so much more of a natural social aspect to being an orchestral instrument. And so I played in all the orchestras, a community orchestra. Went to like state orchestra, all that kind of fun stuff. Made a ton of friends doing it. Really, really enjoyed it. And I felt like I yeah, it was almost like I practiced not because I really enjoyed the practicing, because I liked the outcome of having practiced and what that would bring me. And there were enough really fun rewards and being in these groups that kept me moving forward. And then finally, mid high school, I realized that I was a decent singer, and all of my piano and violin training gave me kind of like a superpower that a lot of my peers did not have, which was that I could read music really, really well. I could sight read. I have a really good sense of pitch. And I ended up doing actually a lot more singing towards the end of high school. And then even into college, I ended up going into like theater and a cappella and all that kind of fun stuff. And eventually, totally pivoted away from it. Like, no music for many, many years. I ended up deciding to go to med school, which is, in many ways all consuming. And I do kind of regret some of that. Like, there are definitely, it might have been a more relaxing and fun hobby than I gave it credit for. But I think in my mind, it was still kind of felt competitive and, like I was wanted to be kind of like out of that race or not feel obligated to do it. And then interestingly, in my 40s, I've like started playing piano again and it's been so much fun. I mean, I've been playing like Taylor Swift, but I mean, even that's been very gratifying. My kids have all taken some form of lessons and my older two have decided to do other things, but my younger is still holding on. She's playing piano and we do tend to practice together, which I don't know if that's like a I don't know. I'll be interested in what you think about that. But her teacher is fine with it. We definitely keep things really short and light, but she just prefers me to be sitting there and guiding her and versus doing it on her own. So yeah, that's kind of my musical journey. I was class vocal, like I was not most likely to succeed. I was not academic. I was not like, anything cool, but it was like I got class vocalist. So like that the fact that I've done nothing with music the rest of my life is really odd because it was a big part of my life growing up.
Mm. Well, and I think it's really wonderful that you're reconnecting with it now as something, you can use for your own enjoyment, maybe because there can be a track we go on in music that feels very rigorous and very all consuming in a different way than your medical school, but it can also feel like an intensity to it that, maybe don't have to go back to that, but you can use it for your own enjoyment and for just enjoying life.
Totally. And honestly, I give my husband some credit for that because I don't think he's as naturally musically inclined, but he started playing guitar a few years ago and it kind of taught me like, oh, this can be more of a hobby than a, pursuit of excellence. And I kind of took it from there.
No, I love hearing that because a lot of us who might be listening and who are music educators and who are teaching students, not all of our students are going to become professional musicians. In fact, a lot of them will go on and have other careers in other fields. But hopefully, my hope for my students is that they keep that love of music there, that they can reconnect with it, even if they put it down for a bit and it can give them something back, can experience some joy there with or relaxation or whatever we need.
Totally.
Yeah. And I was listening to your podcast this morning about analog, analog life.
Yes, I actually think music might have like a moment here because everyone is seeking out hobbies that are entirely unplugged. And one wonderful thing about music as a either hobby or something where you're pursuing getting better is it's very analog and it's very flow inducing, especially if you're really doing a nice job matching the level of difficulty to what you're ready for. And I think people are really looking for those things, activities where they're not going to interrupt themselves with all the digital distractions we have everywhere. So I think music might have a resurgence. I'm just going to predict that right now.
Yes. And I think it's really important to realize music can be a great channel for our energy and channel for our mental focus. And just as you said in your podcast I was listening to, you can't think about something else or ruminate about something else or multitask in your brain when you're really immersed in making music. It just takes
All of it
your whole
takes
brain and
everything.
every bit of your focus. Yes.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something really nice about that. So we don't feel pulled in so many directions. Well, great. I love hearing music. I'm so glad you're putting that back into your life. And I think there was a speaker at a conference I went to once who said she spoke about music and the brain to medical schools and asked the students there, how many of you studied music growing up? And it was like 85, 90% of the hands went up.
Wow.
There's like something there about maybe what we learn about focus and attention to detail and so many things that we learn in music besides the instrument itself that kind of lends to that. It's interesting.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And there's like a music and math connection as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, I would love to pivot a little bit and talk about your new book, which I loved reading. I'll read the subtitle as well. Best Laid Plans: A Simple Planning System for Living a Life That You Love. I have my copy here. I'm holding up on the screen. Whoops, the screen as we talk today. But I would love to hear what prompted you to write it, or what you hope readers would take out of it if listeners are hearing about your book for the first time. And maybe you could share a bit about it.
Yeah, so we all have systems that we use to kind of run our lives, to manage our calendars, to handle our tasks, and to set goals. And these systems, if they're working well, can be incredibly helpful and they can help us do the things we want to do. And if they're not working, can lead to a ton of stress, a lot of reactivity, and just a general sense of frustration that you're not moving forward with the things that you were maybe excited about. And yet, I always felt like, why is nobody talking about the system? So I was a eager devourer of books like Getting Things Done by David Allen and books of that ilk, but I never felt like any of them were written like for me, for a woman, for someone with a family, for someone with maybe even a more structured job, because seeing patients 3 days a week, it's not like I'm, able to quote like time block all my hours necessarily, but I still wanted to make the most of these kind of planning rituals. And so reading all that stuff, I just became more and more passionate about the idea that everyone needs their own really, really functional system. And I basically made one up. And the system that's laid out in Best Laid Plans is like a mega system. Like there are so many ideas for how one might plan at every level, from annual to daily, and all kinds of pitfalls. And it's not my intention that someone's going to read the book and then do every single thing in it. Like honestly, I don't even do every single thing in the book, but I wanted to provide ideas for like every facet of planning and, ways that we're struggling that we might think about doing things differently. And that kind of led to the growth of my podcast where I talked about all these routines, and then into the book where I tried to put all the things together. But yeah, it's kind of just like a meta awareness of what is underlying all the stuff that we're doing in our lives, and why don't we think about whether or not that system is actually functioning in a way that really benefits us.
Yeah, no, I think it's really valuable. And I think, yeah, I always share with listeners, and when I'm giving talks, that I have ADHD. I was diagnosed as an adult. And I think just the planning system of my brain took longer to develop than some. And I think seeing someone break down, or hearing on your podcast how you break down some things behind the scenes and what it really looks like, is really helpful, because it can feel like some people just have it together and some people don't. And then the people that are looking like they have it together probably have an organized system that we can draw from, or be like, oh, no wonder they never forget XYZ. There's all these systems in place behind the scenes.
Yes, and it's not like a system that is like their secret or only they can do. It's probably like you could have your own system, or you could create a system that kind of fits the way that your brain works. Although it is interesting that you said like it took longer. I think people underestimate what a sophisticated piece of executive functioning that planning really is. Like, I mean, from what I've read, the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until people's mid 20s. And I think back to my childhood and playing music, and there was no way I was going to lay out my weekly calendar and plan in when I was going to practice. I don't think I was capable of that. Now, maybe with an adult helping me, I could have been walked through some of these, things as they relate back to music and managing life as a kid growing up. But I do think there is definitely a learning curve, a developmental curve, and you're right that people with different ways of seeing things, like those with ADHD, might approach things differently or come at them later.
Yes, I just heard a study that they think it's more like late 20s for the planning part. And if you have ADHD, that's probably 30% longer to develop it. So
Oh my gosh, send that to me. Seriously, I want to read it. Super cool.
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I will find that. I can link it in the comments for those, or in the show notes for those listening if you're interested. Because, yeah, I think that's really interesting.
But I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Tracks with experience, I think, for people. So it's really helpful to hear those systems. And I think you're right. There's a lot of systems written by men, nothing to take away from men, but just that have not had the lived experience of maybe being a busy mom, balancing mom life and work life.
And even as simple as just like the examples in a productivity book, if you read them and there's clearly no kids and, maybe a very, again, like non time sensitive job, it's just sort of like harder to see how those methods might apply to your own life. So I hope I offered an alternative. And of course, everybody's life is different and people have different types of constraints, but it's nice to at least add something else to the canon.
Yeah, and I think because you lay it out with a lot of options, it doesn't feel like here's the one right way, and if it works for me, it's got to work for you, but more like a
Yes.
choose your own adventure, see what works for you along
Yes.
the way.
A menu, an array of ways you might think about planning in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a great resource, and there's great summaries at the end of the chapters about action plans, I guess, so that you can go back and refer again. So I know I'm going to be referring to that a lot. I would recommend readers, if you're into planning, to definitely check out this book. We'll put a link in the show notes. What do you think of all the tips in your book? Or if you had to pick one section of your book that you would recommend to, I think a lot of listeners are busy parents or busy teachers, busy caregivers who are taking care of young people and balancing their own work lives. Where would you suggest someone start, or what do you think would be most helpful?
Yeah, I think there's two angles in which I think, and again, I'm going to bring like the music just because I know that is one of the focuses of this podcast into it. Number one is to spend some time with your kids and with yourself, intentionally setting goals for a broader scope, like the year. And it could be fun to set musical related goals for the year. They don't have to be super specific. Maybe it's not, I'm going to master this exact piece, but I'm going to master a work by, this composer, or I'm going to, I mean, maybe it is more of an outcome goal, like I'm going to make it into this orchestra or whatever it is, to have an idea of what you are shooting for. And to just kind of keep that in mind as it might shape your rhythms throughout the year, because you might think seasonally, what can I do to support that? And if you're going to look at that annual goal every season and you find that you're not on track, it may motivate you to get back on course. But then also on a micro level, I think the weekly planning piece is probably incredibly important for most people in the music world, because that is where your schedule is defined enough that you can have a very clear idea as to when the music actually fits into your life. And just like planning, by the way, people are like, how do you plan? And I'm like, honestly, as important as how do you plan is when are you going to plan? Because we can talk about how to plan all day, but if you do not have time in your week for this to actually happen, it is worthless. So same with music, right? Like we can talk about the best ways to practice, but if you have not identified that, okay, Tuesday afternoons from 4 to 5:30 or whatever it is, then it's going to be hard to make any progress at all. So I think that as you're entering the week, looking ahead and thinking about, where do the lessons fit in, where do the practice sessions fit in, and making sure everybody's on board, with the plan, and maybe even talking about, okay, if you don't feel like it on a certain time, do we have a backup? Things like that. And I could have benefited from this practice in my life growing up, especially because, I wasn't just, I did other things. I did cheerleading, I was busy. And I do feel like with a little bit more forward planning, I might have been less stressed at like, oh my gosh, I don't know this music in our, dress rehearsals tomorrow. And whatever it was. So takes some of the reactivity out of it and probably makes things a lot more fun. Yeah, so I guess I would say big picture to at least do some of that, because also it will help you understand what support your musician actually needs or would merit. And then again, on the micro level, where do these sessions actually fit in with the rest of life and how can we support that?
Absolutely. And I know I've heard the advice a lot, tell people to practice the same time every day. But then I know in my family's life, my kids are older now, but our day to day did not look the same Monday to Tuesday or one week to the other week. And so I really like what you're saying about that weekly planning for the specific week, not an ideal week or a magical week where everything's perfect, right?
Correct. Yeah, not an ideal week. Literally looking ahead, okay, you have that dinner on Wednesday night, and on Thursday you're staying late for debate. So, like, where does it make sense? And your kid might actually like really appreciate. I mean, some kids might rebel against that, and they just don't want to be told, and that's fine. In fact, in that case, I probably would say to them, okay, well, how much practice do you want to get in? I would ask them, and then be like, well, when do you think it would make sense? And at least they've thought through it. Whether they do it or not is one thing, but at least you've given them the tools to kind of like think through it. And then other kids might really like the strategizing of actually slotting it in.
Right. And I think the older your child is, the more we want to at least partner with them in doing that versus dictate it so that they feel like they have some ownership. So
Absolutely.
do you do something similar with your own child that's playing piano?
Yeah, well, my strategy with her has been to keep lessons quite short, but make sure to do it pretty much every day. Because for her, I do feel like she will get stressed out if she feels like she has to do it for too long. So the it's more of like a James Clear, like we're sitting down at the piano, and then however long we can, get through, we get through. For us, because it's a fairly short time and because she's young, she just turned 8, we do not plan it ahead. Instead, I have a pretty stereotyped time when I do it, which is like I get home from work, we eat dinner, and then before she gets on any screen, I'm like, let's do piano. And then, it just kind of fits in naturally. But I could totally see that as she does more activities or as the practice sessions become more long or more independent, that it might be more like thinking ahead through the week and like, where does this actually fit?
Sure, sure. But it sounds like you have a routine to it. It's like sandwiched
Yes.
between a couple things that are predictable.
We have a routine because again, she's younger and she's not at that stage where she has like my older ones. Yes, Tuesday's different than Wednesday's different from Thursday. Her life isn't really terribly like that yet. So for us right now, a standard routinized version works pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to hear real life examples, I think, of how people make it work. I think I remember you mentioning that sometimes you link up your own practice to your daughter's practice. And I wondered if you could say anything about that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. If there are any adults that are listening to this who maybe used to be musicians and now they're kind of playing alongside with your child, I highly recommend making the time slot when you pick up your instrument to be right after they pick up theirs. It's just so natural and so easy. And it provides this amazing example to your kid because they'll hear you getting better playing day after day. And for me, that's been fantastic. So generally, okay, and again, I'm not at like virtuosic level or anything like that, but I'm playing like a Taylor Swift songbook and honestly it's sounding better and better. Like I'm pretty pleased with myself. And when I started it was not. I played really well by ear, but like I didn't quite have a lot of the kind of underlying chords right. I was like hacking it and now it's better because I'm actually using the chords in the book. And yeah, it's just been so fun. And all of my practicing has pretty much been, I play with her for maybe 15 minutes and then she's done and then I'm on there for however long. And sometimes I've surprised myself with how long I kind of get into that flow and I'm into it and it sounds good and it's fun or I'm progressing. But yeah, I think it just serves so many purposes. It's relaxing. It's a good example for them and you get to learn something. So I totally recommend trying that out.
I think it's great for kids too to see that progression of mom is also practicing and it sounded so so and then it got better.
Oh, and that mom is making mistakes, that mom is messing up all the time too. Because I think, at least with her, like, she just wants to play it right the first time. And it's like, no, of course you're not going to play it right the first time. We're going to give you harder and harder stuff. So if you're not going to play it right the first time. And if she hears me messing up, I think that is so healthy to be like, oh, that's what practicing is. It's playing it a whole bunch of times, playing it really slow, breaking it down. That's not me being remediated because I can't do it. That is just how practicing actually works. So I think that's been helpful for her to hear.
Oh, I think that's really good to hear someone's experience with that. I do think that's really valuable because kids can feel like, oh, everything's easy for everybody else, but not me, or there's something wrong with me that is not easy on that first try. So we kind of demonstrating that this is just a process for every person, even your parents who, theoretically know more than you about all the things. I think that can be really, really helpful for kids.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think for anybody listening, what you're saying about you practicing with your daughter a lot and wondering if it's the right thing, but there's just something about that could be kind of lonely. You found like, oh, I like violin because it's so much more social. So some kids just feel really isolated if they have to practice alone on their instrument. And also there's like a body doubling thing of it just feels easier if somebody is
Oh, that makes
in the
sense.
room versus left to your own devices. So I think there's a lot that's really helpful about having, if the child wants it and benefits from it, like you're saying, then I think it's really healthy to be in there. And um, there's a lot of things we're supporting that are kind of invisible there that are really good for kids.
Oh, that's cool. Every once in a while, her teacher she'll write LOYO on it. That means learn on your own. She's like, oh, I have a low yo, and I'll go away so she can work on learning it on her own. Because I guess she wants to make sure that like she's not totally feeling like I have to be sitting there, but mostly I am sitting there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think just like little pockets, but knowing mom's coming back, that can be great. I love that. And yeah, it'll be fun to see how that progresses over time. And
Yeah, I have no idea if she'll stick with it, but right now it's fun and it's a little bit of a bonding thing too. So I guess if she ever pivots to something else, we'll have to find a new joint activity.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of people will say, "Oh, this is the one-on-one time, like really intense, hopefully positive one-on-one time I have with my child like every single day or most every day." That's really
Yeah.
a great thing with our kids. One more thing before we leave listeners with a tip is one of your tips that I think is really helpful to me. And, music teachers and teachers of all kinds have to be planners and project out, full school years ahead. And I think you're the only person I've heard who talks about planning your vacations, a year to a year and a half in advance. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I do.
I mean, to be fair, I sort of have to some extent. I have to plan at least which weeks I'm taking because the way I work in medicine, like we have to create our entire next year's call schedule by like August of the current year. So I will be thinking about, December of 27 and August of 2026. And it's really, really far out there. But if I don't identify what I want, then I'm just going to get randomness and nobody wants that. So to some extent, it's forced. But I think a lot of people underplan or they're afraid of planning because it might change. And it's true, it might change. I just had to change something. But, even if it works out 80% of the time, you probably saved yourself a lot of headache.
Yes, yes. And I think for me, running my own studio, I am planning out that far ahead because of when does the term end and start for my studio? When am I planning recitals? When am I taking off in the summer versus how many lessons does each student need? And so for me too, people are always like, what? How do you already have this plan for a year from now? I'm like, I have to. Otherwise,
Oh my gosh, our piano teacher is so organized too. She has this beautiful book, like it's a work of art.
yes, yes, exactly. So I do think we have to have systems and be organized as teachers, whether that's even, I always say my inside my brain is not very organized, so I have to have really great systems outside my brain to keep me on track, which are really helpful. I wondered if you could give a brief overview about your nested goals system. And just I do think that helped me think a lot about maybe part of what I already do and put words to it, but also what might be missing from that. So I'd love to hear you explain that just a little bit.
Yeah. So nested goals comes from the idea of like nesting dolls. And I was thinking about how, you make your goals for a big patch of time, like a year, and then embedded within that, you might have goals for the season, the month, the week, the day. And how are those connected? And I thought about it and I'm like, well, honestly, you should always be doing each of these levels. But not only that, but every time you sit down to do a planning session, the planning session should be scaled to the amount of time you want. So if you're planning the year, you got to go all out and really get yourself in the mindset to plan and maybe spend a few hours and put a lot of energy into it versus every day. You're going to plan for like 5 minutes. And as you do that planning, you always want to refer back to the list one level above, not all the lists, just the list one level above, because that way you're not going to overwhelm yourself with like all of your hopes and dreams every single day. That's too much. But things are going to gradually move forward. Like you can imagine, every season you're going to pull out that annual list. Oh, which of these big goals does it make sense to move forward with this season? Every month you're going to pull out that seasonal list. Every week you're going to pull out your monthly list. And every day you're going to look at what you have for the week. And I often say that the weekly level is kind of where big dreams become tasks and then become calendared and then they happen. But yeah, I use the term nested goals to say how all of this planning links together and to encourage people to come up with planning rituals at every single one of these levels. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, it sounds intimidating because you're like, that's a lot of levels. But let's say there's 1 year and maybe you're dividing the year into 4 or 5 seasons and then there's 12 months. So that's, maybe 20 bigger planning sessions throughout the course of the year. And all the rest of them are really small. It's like every week you're figuring out what to do every day. And that amount of effort to end up linking like these big dreams that you've made at the start of the year and not lose sight of them all year long, to me, that's very, very worthwhile. It's like making sure your ship is continuing to go in the right direction by periodically looking at the direction versus like, oh, well, set it and forget it. We'll look at it at the end of the year. So, yeah, that is what I coined nested goals. And I love using the system and teaching it to others. And you can totally minimize it. So, you could say that is too much planning. I'm just going to go year, month, day, and it will still work. So, you can choose the time intervals that make sense for you, play with it. But I really encourage anyone who's struggled with goal setting to give it a try.
Yeah, I find it very valuable. And just to remember, that's how I'm not going to let things fall through the cracks, is having a system to check all the various things. So I really encourage people to check out that chapter in your book. And um,
Yes.
oh, I think a couple of things I'll just share that I have also gotten from Sarah's work. One thing is a ADHD planner that you recommended on your podcast. I was mentioning it to you before we hit record today, called the Fast Brain Friend, and it has a weekly or planning section at the beginning, and then the daily organizing of your time is looks really different from day to day, and not just visually. Like I literally have to think differently about time, to think about how to write in what I'm going to do when in the day, which is probably the first planner I have used consistently and haven't my brain hasn't gotten bored of. So I think it's really a great one. I'll link to that in the show notes. It's not cheap, but I really appreciate you passing on the information about that planner because it's really helped.
I love that so much. And I will say a couple of my kids have ADHD, and for kids, I have loved the Order Out of Chaos planner. It's pretty open-ended, but it really allows them to see their entire week and it kind of helps with task management and it's designed specifically. I mean, it could be used for anyone. Like my non-ADHD child was like, I want that too. So it's not specific, but that's one if you're looking for one for a kid. Yours might be actually for like a high schooler who like really gets bored by using a resource. They might love Fast Brain Friend, but for a younger kid, maybe look at Order Out of Chaos as well.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that recommendation for everyone. Yes. And then I think the other thing since listening to you, I broke up my year instead of into quarters, into quintiles or 5 sections. And so
Yes.
that's been really helpful to me because I realized from about, well, for sure from Thanksgiving week through the end of the year, if I try to lump that in and put like certain goals there, like really what's happening there is, holiday concerts because I'm a music teacher, whether I'm playing in them or helping students get ready for them, and just a lot of family things. And it was really messing with my ability to plan to lump that in with with the fall or however you divide that up. So just that simple. Okay, I'm going to think of the year in 5 parts, and that's going to get its own part of the year has been really helpful to me too.
Yes. And for anyone who just wants to know where I recommend, you can do the cut points wherever you want. But if you have school age kids, for some people, I do beginning of the year, like January 1st to spring break to the end of the school year. All of summer is its own season or quintile. The beginning of the school year until like Thanksgiving ish, or maybe some people say Halloween, November 1st, depends on what your rhythms are like. And then that final reflection and celebration season. And I agree, for me, that is not a productive season, but it's a really fun one. So that's okay.
Yes, yes. And I think for a lot of musicians, it's like heavy on the performances. And so then other like
Yes.
computer projects or writing article, like I should not put them there, I have learned. And so it helps me
They
break them
belong in
up.
January when you have all the fresh energy and you have all the time and probably not a lot of performances. So it'll make sense.
Exactly, exactly. So that's a helpful. And I've heard you talk about some people break the year into six parts. So there's not,
Not one way to do it.
yeah. And I like that. I feel like people always talk to us about quarters and it's really helped me expand my thinking to hear your advice.
Thank you. Yeah, if quarters work for you, stick with it. But if you find they don't, for me, I was like, especially I struggled with that. I don't know, like July to August, like didn't didn't make sense to me. And then even the other one, like September to October, I'm like, no, September and October are like the same. That is clearly the same season. There should not be a line between them. And so that led to me dividing up the year a little differently.
Yeah, yeah. And I think if I could distill it all down into one thing that you just say over and over is just make your planning system work for you.
Play with it, enjoy it, give it attention because it's worth paying attention to because it impacts everything else. But yeah, not one right way to do that. Lots of inspiration and ideas of how you might do that.
Yeah, great. I appreciate it. Well, I always love to wrap up our conversations by sharing a tip of some kind with listeners. It could be a planning tip or a music tip or a mix of both. But I wondered if you had any advice you could send everyone off into their week with today.
Yeah. Oh, I have to do one I didn't do. And I guess find some form of tracking that is fun for you. Now, if tracking is totally not fun for you and you're like actually tracking, like putting a dot on a chart when I practice is demoralizing, totally feel free not to do it. But I think for some people, it can just add an element of fun, especially if you're not all or nothing about it. Like, oh, once I break the streak, I don't want to track anymore. No, no, no. Like, let's see how full we can make this calendar and how many cool stickers or dots we can put there. But I definitely think for music, this is a place that's ripe for creativity. And so I encourage you that if you are looking to practice more, have fun figuring out a tracking method that works for you.
I love that. I love that. One of our past guests, Merritt Biddix, a flute teacher, was saying when we make music, our accomplishments sort of disappear into the air. You don't have anything tangible to hold on to that you've done something. And so I think the tracking in some way can help us see, like, oh, I did do this.
You put a dot on the calendar. You
Exactly.
did it.
Exactly. Great advice for the week ahead. Well, Sarah, thank you for being here. I hope listeners will check out your book, but we really appreciate your time and all you do to help listeners and help those who read your books.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we go today, here are a few of my takeaways from this week's episode with Sarah Hart-Unger. Getting this episode ready to come out made me want to reread Sarah's book all over again. So if you enjoyed this episode and want more ideas for planning, I can't recommend her book enough and her podcast, both with the same title, Best Laid Plans. I get a lot out of listening to that podcast each week, and I will put a link to both of these resources in the show notes and on my website on the post related to this episode. I also thought it was very interesting to hear her talk about her own musical experiences growing up, the importance of that social aspect of music for her, and her drive for achievement and how it fit in with music and music practice. I also thought it was very interesting to hear how, although she didn't always want to practice, she enjoyed the results of having practiced and her practice sessions. Those themes come up so often on this podcast, and her experience really drove that home to me all over again. I also really liked her idea of having nested goals. I think we often make goals like these in our music studies, and talking about them can be really helpful. I think as parents and teachers and caregivers supporting young music students, one way we can help our students with this idea is modeling it for them. So, not only planning goals and breaking them down over time, but also making that process visible to our students so they can see it and eventually adopt it for themselves. I was thinking about how we have a recital coming up in mid-May in my studio, and that is our longer term goal. Maybe it's been on the calendar for a whole semester or a whole school year. And then each month there are tasks related to that that need to happen, especially now when I'm recording this in March. In April and May coming up, we will be picking the piece the student's going to perform. We're going to be talking about how to prepare it in a specific way and ways in order to get it ready to play at a high level. And then there's also tasks that families will have to block out on their calendar, like making sure they have the time to attend, the pianist rehearsal on their calendar, when are they going to find the outfit their child will wear, or make sure they have nice shoes that still fit, things like this. And also, inviting family members or friends to come watch. So we can think about which tasks that need to be done will fall into each month. And then likewise, week by week, we can take from that monthly list and put them into our weekly to-do lists, and then day by day, what's going to happen besides the daily practice. That will help us get ready to show up on recital day being well prepared. I also loved the conversation around planners for those with ADHD. And I feel like use a planner is always advice that's given to those who need to organize themselves better. But many planners are not really set up for ADHD brains. So the one I love is called the Fast Brain Friend. And I will put a link to that in the show notes. And I'll put some pictures of what the inside looks like in my post related to this episode. And then there's also the Order Out of Chaos planner that she recommended for kids. And I have not gotten a hold of a copy of that yet, but I plan to, so I can check it out and maybe add it to my list of recommended resources as well. Maybe you want to check those out yourself, so we'll make sure there's links to those in the show notes. I hope this week's conversation inspired you to think about planning and scheduling and how that relates to music practice in your own life or your students' life. I'm wishing you a productive week of practice ahead. Take good care, everyone.